Welcome back to another episode of the Crime Scene Insiders. I'm one of your hosts, Dionne Watson, and I'm joined by my co-host, Angela Davies. And we are going to take you back underneath the barrier tape.
Thank you for joining us for another episode. The last couple of weeks we've had some fabulous guests on, which we've thoroughly enjoyed and we hope you have too. But this week it's back to just the two of us. Oh no, I forgot the rule, no singing on the podcast.
I think we've broken it at least 3 or 5 episodes.
Probably. So apologies in advance because it is back to just us two.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, hopefully still enjoyable. And this week, what we are going to do is cover the Raoul Moat investigation. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
The big one.
A really big one. So we worked in the police at the time of the Raoul Moat investigation, and it was a really strange and weird time to actually be in the police. But
really
also, it's 15 years ago that incident happened.
Wow.
I know it seems a bit bonkers to me because in some ways it feels like 2 minutes ago, and in other ways it feels like an absolute lifetime ago.
Yeah, I agree.
And so we wanted to go over what happened because effectively he walked out of prison and sparked the biggest manhunt the UK has ever seen. And I think to date it's still been one of the biggest manhunt. And he just left a trail of devastation behind him, didn't he?
Yeah.
But also it is 15 years to the day. So it's the 11th of July today. And in the early hours of the 11th of July 2010, the siege with Raoul ended when he took his own life. So we thought it was a really apt and appropriate time to cover this investigation.
Yeah, it really does.
And I think a good place to start would be with Raoul himself and introduce Raoul Moat, because there were a lot of victims involved. It was a huge manhunt. It was known nationally and internationally. But all of it leads back to Raoul himself.
It does.
So what do we know about Raoul then?
Raoul grew up in an area of Newcastle called Fenham, and he was brought up with his half-brother called Angus. And he lived mostly with his grandmother. She brought the two of them up. And this was because Raoul's mum suffered a lot with mental health issues. She was bipolar and spent a lot of her time in and out of psychiatric hospitals, unfortunately. And Raoul didn't actually know his real dad. So he didn't have any involvement with his father at all. And it's reported he didn't know about him till much later in life as well. And he would have actually have liked to have had some involvement with Raoul in his upbringing.
Well, that's really tough.
It is, isn't it?
It's quite sad, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it is quite sad that.
I believe as a result, from some of the things that I've read over the years as well, that Raoul actually suffered with mental health issues himself. He had quite a lot of depression, anger issues. He was reactive and couldn't control his emotions very well. He tried to commit suicide twice, from what I believe.
Yeah, I've read a lot about that as well. And I believe it actually came in to the inquest after he killed himself, that he was suffering with bipolar himself.
Oh, really?
Yes, but I don't know that this was ever found until afterwards.
Until the inquest.
So it wasn't, I don't believe it was ever treated. There is reports of Raoul trying to get help with therapy, but he didn't actually attend any of the appointments that were made for him.
Yeah, there's actually a book by Andrew Hankinson that's called You Could Have Done Something Amazing with Your Life. And he used transcripts of tapes that Raoul had recorded when he was on the run, and also some tapes beforehand, as well as biographical information from interviews. And then also he attended the trials of Moat's accomplices, and we'll go on to discuss a bit further. And he was saying in the book that he came from a broken family and he had mental health issues and anger issues, but he wouldn't actually engage with the services. So with the appointments that he had, he just wasn't turning up.
That's such a shame, isn't it? Because
It
you wonder
is.
how things could have turned out differently. Would they have turned out differently?
Well,
You don't know, do you?
no, because I believe he actually completed one of the psychiatric forms and submitted the form and had an appointment. He didn't turn up to it, but they realised how much he was struggling. And as a result, normally they discharge him because for non-attendance, but they actually
Mm.
gave him a second appointment.
Which is unusual.
Yeah, but he also didn't attend that one, and then he got discharged from services.
Okay.
I find it interesting. He also seemed a bit paranoid about the police. I think that he had a lot of
Yeah.
interaction with the police, but he saw it as harassment. He thought that
Yeah.
they were constantly on at him and that he couldn't go anywhere or move without the police being there or on him.
Yeah. I do recall that from his phone conversations with the police. That was one of the things that he kept saying, that he couldn't drive down the road without being stopped. But I think it turned out he's been arrested something like 12 times, but I think he'd only been charged with 7 offences. And Raoul was 37. So, although that for a lot of people, 12 times being arrested might seem like a lot, for someone who's saying they're being constantly harassed and pulled in, that doesn't seem like a huge amount in 37
37
years, really,
years.
does it?
No. And I mean, let's face it, he was doing things wrong when he was
Yes.
pulled over, wasn't he?
So, for example, one of them, he was pulled over and it was for driving an uninsured vehicle. So, it's stuff that a vehicle would be stopped for. And it's not necessarily because they know who's driving the vehicle, but if a vehicle's driving in a certain way and they run the registration and realise it's uninsured, of course, that
You're going to
person's
get
going to
pulled
be
over.
pulled over. And it's not to do with who's behind the wheel of the vehicle.
From some of the things that I've read about him over the years, he seemed to be a smart man, I thought. He seemed to be
Yes.
aware, really, that he had anger issues, aware that he was reacting excessively often to situations and that his emotions were not in check. So he was quite self aware. But he also
Yeah.
seemed to be a grafter as well. There's talk about how hard he worked and he had a number of different jobs.
So he'd been a bouncer for a long time in Newcastle city centre, which I actually believe is how he met Samantha. He'd been a panel beater. He was a bodybuilder.
I mean, to be a bodybuilder, it takes some commitment and dedication.
Yeah, it does. And then I believe that when he got with Samantha, he actually stopped doing the bodybuilding and he started his own business. He was a tree surgeon. I believe his business was called Mr. Trimmett,
Was it? I
which is
didn't know that. I like that.
quite a nice business name, isn't it? Trimmett
Mr.
for a
Trimmett.
for a tree surgeon. Yeah.
But also, I do think he had a bit of an obsessive side. I read somewhere that it was described that women were his weakness. Like, I think
Hmm.
when he loved really hard. And apparently, so much so, he was so broken when he split up with one of his exes that he actually had to have hypnotherapy to help him get over it.
Really?
Yeah.
From some of the things reading about his exes, it seems like he could be quite possessive. There was quite a lot of jealousy coming in. And I think this is where we start seeing some of the aggressive sides of Raoul, really, around the relationships that he had. A lot of them seem to be quite dysfunctional.
Yeah.
But he had 3 children. He had 3 little girls, all to different mothers, and each one of them have reports of abuse. His oldest child, called Caitlin, I believe she was 11 at the time of the attack. She didn't actually know anything about Raoul. She believed that her stepfather was her father until she was a little bit older. And there'd been a lot of abuse again with her mother. And actually, when Raoul found out that she was having a child, there's reports that then he threatened to kill the unborn child.
Oh, wow.
Um, so obviously they separated, and from what I believe there was a restraining order put in place to keep him away because of the threats. So
Well, you
his
would, wouldn't you?
definitely. So his oldest daughter didn't meet her father at all. And it's reported actually that the first time she heard his voice or anything was on the TV when the reports were coming out about him doing the phone calls and ringing in. And it was the first time she'd heard her dad speak.
That must have
And
been weird.
it must have been, mustn't it? It must be
Yeah,
really traumatic, I think, for
yeah.
anyone, but especially if she was only 11 at the time. That's
Young
a
age,
lot
isn't it?
for a
It is a
child, isn't
lot.
it?
It's interesting, though, that he didn't know, never met his dad. And actually, that caused a number of issues for him. Yet he's done the same with his daughter.
A lot of the reports and when he's doing the phone-ins and things as well, he always said that he was adamant that he was a real family man and that he'd never hurt any of his children and he never would. So I was quite surprised reading the details of that.
Well,
And
Raoul was in prison, wasn't he?
yes,
Leading up to
so
this incident.
yes, so he was in prison, and this was for his second daughter, who was 9 at the time. She had reported to an adult, I think they'd said it was one of her teachers, abuse at home. And Raoul was actually arrested and he served an 18-week sentence for an assault on his 9-year-old daughter, and that's what he was in prison for at the time.
18 weeks is not that long for assaulting a 9-year-old.
It's not,
Really,
no.
is it?
No, it's not a lot at all. And that daughter, she came out afterwards, years after everything had concluded with Raoul Moat, and actually she paints a picture of real abuse in the home where she was beaten. She was forced to take freezing cold baths with just her nose out. She'd be fully submerged. She'd be made to stood outside in the pouring rain in just a thin nightdress, and neighbours had reported seeing her like that too. And there's even one report that he killed their pet dog in front of her with a baseball bat with glass all over it.
Oh, that's brutal.
It's
That's
horrendous.
horrific. Yeah,
And she was
all of
terrified
it.
at it's awful, isn't it? And she was terrified at that point that he was going to kill someone. And what's really sad is the report says she hoped it would be her,
Oh, no, really?
which is awful because she was terrified. And one of the quotes that I thought was really sad in reading the statements she made was that she said that most kids are scared of the monster under the bed, but
Yeah.
she said the monster in her house was sleeping in the room next to her.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
And it really is. It's so sad. And like you say, this is the reason he was in jail at the time, and it was for this assault. So I don't think all of this other abuse had came out at that point, because 18 weeks, if you knew all of that, seems so little, doesn't it?
It really does. It is heartbreaking, but the thing that I find bizarre is when you listen and you read some of the transcripts of his phone calls with the police, he actually believed that he was a good father and that he wasn't guilty and he hadn't done those things, and that the
Yeah,
police actually were the problem,
yeah. It's
and that his
crazy, isn't
conviction
it?
was wrong.
Yeah,
But then here you have his daughter specifying incidents of such abuse. You've got an ex-partner with a restraining order
yeah.
against him,
It's awful, isn't it?
alleged threats to kill an unborn baby. I mean, it doesn't paint a very nice picture at all, does it?
No, it doesn't paint the picture that was being put out there, like you say, through his calls. And he was a doting father, and he would do anything for his
Anything.
children, and he would never hurt them. His children are saying pretty much the opposite.
The exact opposite.
So the 9-year-old Chantel, who'd just been to court as well, apparently when he was sentenced, he said, You're free now. And she was like, I won't be free whilst he's still alive. So it says the level of threat that she felt was there.
Imagine it being 9-year-old and living with that level of fear from your own father.
I know.
I mean, the sad thing is that happens all too often, is it?
It does.
Talking about child abuse, but it does happen all too often. It's not, this case sadly is not a standalone in that respect, is it?
Yeah, it's not unique, unfortunately. That was Chantel, his middle daughter. And
Mhm.
then he had another daughter called Chanel, who was 3 at the time of the incident. And Chanel was the daughter that he shared with Samantha.
So Sam Stobbart is his ex-girlfriend who
Yes,
Raoul shot along with her new partner, Chris Brown.
yes.
So when he was in prison, Sam actually split up from him.
Which apparently wasn't a new thing. Their relationship, they'd been together 6 years and it was very turbulent, and they'd been on and off for pretty much the whole of that time they were together as well.
But also because of his conviction, hadn't social services said that she would potentially lose her daughter if she continued a relationship with him because of the abuse of the 9-year-old and what had come out in the fact that he was in prison for it, for assaulting
Yeah,
a minor.
that's reportedly one of the reasons that she chose to sever ties and stop that relationship. Yes.
When they met, wasn't she 16?
Yes, she was very young when they met. I believe she was 16 and he was 15 years her senior.
So quite impressionable at
Yeah,
16.
definitely an impressionable age, isn't it?
And also bearing in mind that he did have kind of this obsessive, possessive nature as well. So
Yeah.
she'd ended the relationship, but he was still contacting her and calling her all the time.
Yes. So he was in prison by this point, wasn't he? And
Mm.
apparently there was still incessant phone calls, and he was still adamant that they were an item and were still together, despite the fact she had actually separated and split up with him.
Because he wouldn't really accept the ending of the relationship. And
Yeah.
so when he talks about her and Chris being together, he talks about it as though she's had an affair and cheated on him.
Yes.
And that's what's driven him around the bend effectively. But it
Yeah.
wasn't actually ever an affair.
No.
He does seem a bit delusional in quite a lot of ways, doesn't he? To think that he's a good father, he's a doting father, he's not abusive, the police are harassing him, he hasn't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
That
It's very woe is me and the world is against me sort of
that
thing, isn't it?
yeah, that they're still in a relationship even though she's ended it. She had no right to move on as far as he was concerned. He considered it cheating.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot of delusion there.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's no accountability for any of it. Well, I have done this because of this, and we see that continue throughout this manhunting story. Actually, don't we? As things unfold, this blame other people
The blame
continues
game.
through. Yeah, so he was in prison for this 18-week period. He would not let go of this relationship. Still harassed Samantha, to the point Samantha did actually then tell him that she was in a new relationship and had met someone else. He wasn't very happy about this at all, made
No.
threats, and as an attempt to protect herself and her new partner, she told Raoul that Chris was actually a police officer.
Now, this is a really interesting twist, isn't it? And I
Yes,
wonder if things would have unfolded differently had she not gone down that route. Now, I can see why she did. I can
completely.
understand her thinking behind that, but it did set off a chain of events, bearing in mind his paranoia and hatred of the police.
Yeah, Christopher Brown wasn't actually a police officer at all, was he?
No,
He was 29 years old at the time of the incident, and he wasn't from the Northeast. He was actually from Berkshire. He'd only been in the Northeast for about 6 months, I believe, prior to the shooting,
not very long at
which is
all.
really sad. He hadn't been here very long, and he was busy building his business as a karate instructor. And he met Samantha whilst he was out dropping leaflets and things trying to promote his businesses. And they hadn't been together very long at all. Believe it was only a few weeks that I'd been seeing each other. And like you say, you can see why Samantha would say that and think it would protect and be like, stay away. Because she had begged him to stay away from the three
Yeah,
of them, but he was not having it. So she's used this as a way of to try and protect them. But it sounds like it infuriated and kind of poured
yeah.
fuel on the situation, really, didn't it? But from the past and hearing how he was with other people, would he really have left her alone if she didn't say it either? He sounded like he was so annoyed about this. He's seen Samantha as a relationship that was really stable, and he seemed to see like that was his family, and he said that was him settling down, even though from all accounts it sounds like it was still a very abusive relationship. You don't know. He did blame that as one of the reasons he shot Christopher, and he said that he wouldn't have done it if he was not a police officer. But we don't know that, do we?
Who knows? It sounds like he's so possessive that it wouldn't really have mattered who Sam moved on with.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't think that he was ready to let her go.
Unfortunately.
One of the things that he said is that the police, though, had taken everything from him, because he blamed the police for the loss of his relationship as well. So he said that they took his home, they took his liberty, they took his girlfriend. He'd lost everything because of the police, and now the police were taking his girlfriend because a police officer was now in a relationship with her, and that's how he saw it, that basically everything that had gone wrong and bad in his life was down to the police.
Yeah.
Like you say, no accountability and blame.
Yeah. Well, this is to do with you, not to do with my behaviour of assaulting my daughter and getting put in prison in the first place. That never happened. It was just the police preying on me.
Yeah. Because that's what they do. They look for innocent people and make their lives hell, because they've got so much time on their hands.
Yeah, exactly.
So Raoul found out that she was in this relationship while he was still in prison, and he started making threats, hadn't he, before his release, and prison staff were actually aware of this threat.
Yeah, prison staff, other inmates had reported it as well, and said that they thought he would do something when he was released.
I think he basically said that he was going to go and get a gun and kill both of them, both Sam and Chris.
Yeah. And he started planning all of this whilst he was still inside. So they've got phone records of him calling some of his accomplices. It was effectively him ordering the gun and the ammunition whilst he was inside.
And yet he got released.
Yes. So he was released on the 1st of July.
Mm-hmm.
And a prison warden did report on I think it's a security information form. He reported that he had concerns and that there was risk to Samantha and her new partner when he was released. But unfortunately, it didn't land on Northumbria Police's desk into the correct department. It didn't get there till the Friday night after the department was already closed.
So therefore it was missed going into the weekend.
Yes, so it went into the weekend where that department's closed over it. Nobody got eyes on it until well after. But that report should have effectively landed on Northumbria's desk the day that he was released from prison.
Or even prior to it. If people were already aware that he was making these plans and making these threats, and they knew that was the date he was being released, really, Northumbria should have been warned even the day before.
Well, don't you find it bizarre as well in our prison service? Someone can be serving time. They can be actively talking about what they're going to do to someone when they leave, but then they just get released like everything's normal and okay.
And yeah, it is a bit bizarre because it is effectively a plan to kill, isn't it?
Yeah, because of the conversations that had went on, it did sound like it was a threat. It was a threat to life.
I am surprised that nothing was done about that, other than a report going over too late to the force.
It's quite scary that something can be sat on like that, isn't it, and not acted on straight away, because it was just via an email as well. It gets dropped over. You would think with something so urgent, it would be like let's speak to someone and let's make sure this has gone across, but that's the system, which is very strange, I think.
I suppose, but the other thing is a lot of these systems are broken. A lot of them are under-resourced and are at capacity. a lot of the staff there are dealing with a lot of stuff, and they probably hear so much all the time, and some of it probably comes off and some of it probably doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, it's what is the level of threat? Is he just being a big man because his girlfriend's got a new boyfriend? Or is it a genuine threat? And like, how do you
That's very
assess
true
that?
as well.
Unfortunately, in this instance, he was not
was true.
bullying.
No, he was not. So that was on the Thursday, the 1st of July. And this is kind of where everything kicks off, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then the dates that most people will be aware of is the Saturday, the 3rd of July. And this is where the first shootings happened. So Samantha and Chris had been out in Newcastle in the city centre having some drinks. And then Chris had walked her home and they decided to pop into their friends where her daughter and Raoul's daughter, Chanel, was staying for the night. They popped in to have a nightcap. So they all sat together, they were talking. And what they didn't realise at this point is this is where Raoul had actually approached the property. So one of Raoul's accomplices had dropped him off at the property, and Raoul was sat waiting underneath the window of the address, listening in to their conversations and deciding when he was going to attack. So he had the gun ready. He was sat listening to the conversations. And one of the things that came out later to this is whilst he was sat under that window listening in, he was actually texting one of his accomplices and saying things like, I can hear them. He said they were talking about him, which actually everybody still denied happened. But he was saying they mentioned him and were talking about him and slagging him off. And then at one
that's
point,
good justification, isn't it?
Isn't it just, they slagged me off.
Going back to that blame game.
Mm.
They were really mean about me.
Yeah. Because I think in his conversation with the police when he called up, he said something along the lines of, if ever I was going to back down after hearing the way Sam was talking about me, there was no backing down. And at one point, someone opened the window that he was sitting underneath at the time. Which
I don't know why, I just got a bit of a chill.
I know, that did a chill for me as well.
Yeah,
the thought of like opening your window and the sat there waiting.
There. It's creepy.
Yeah. So at that point, he texted his accomplice and said, they've opened the window. I'm not sure if it's open enough, if I could lean in or if it would be too obstructed. What do you think?
Wow, asking for advice on how to kill.
At that point, he thought he might just lean through the window, but he didn't know if it would be successful or not. So he lay in wait, and about, I think it was around 2:30 a.m, they were leaving, and they came out of the front door. Samantha has apparently given Chris a kiss. They left, and as they walked out, Raoul then approached, and they realised Raoul was there. Chris stood in front of Samantha because he seen the gun, and he shot Christopher for the first time. Apparently, at this stage, he then pointed the gun at Samantha and she ran away and ran into the house and shut the door behind her. And then he went on to shoot Chris another 2 times. So he'd shot him in the neck, the chest, and then the last one, which I believe Samantha seen from the window, he then shot Christopher in the head at point blank range with a sawn-off shotgun is what he was using.
He had no chance, did he?
No. So then after...
That's brutal.
It's really brutal, isn't it? He must have been terrified.
Yeah. And Sam, and watching that. And watching seeing it through the window.
Yeah. And for him as well, he's seen the gun, and for him to stand in front of Samantha to protect her like that as well. I think that says something about his character, doesn't it? Yeah, really.
It really does.
Really brave to stand up to a man like that anyway, because from all accounts, Raoul was a big guy. He was a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
There was reports he was using steroids as well. He was really bulky. He was like mid 6 foot, 6.5 foot. So he must have been an intimidating guy without a sawn-off shotgun in his hand.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone knew that he was aggressive. So you've got an aggressive bully of that size already, like you're saying, without them bringing in the sawn-off.
Yeah.
Must have been terrifying.
It must have been. And I think that says a lot about Chris to stand in front of her and try to protect her in that way, which gave her the chance to get inside as well.
Yeah.
Then, as it unfolded further, after Raoul shot Christopher in the head opposite the house, he then turned the weapon, and at this point, Samantha was watching. She'd looked out of the sitting room window, and he then fired 2 shots at Samantha into the sitting room window, and then he ran off.
Now, Samantha was severely injured, wasn't she? She was critical, but she did survive.
She did, yes. And apparently that was to do with the way she was stood. Her arm was in the way of her abdomen, and her arm took the brunt of the first shot.
And had she not been stood like that, she likely would have died.
Yeah, that's what they've said.
Again, interestingly, Raoul was insistent that he wasn't trying to kill Samantha. He just wanted to injure her so that she could get some compensation to help her.
Yes, and he's adamant as well that he actually altered that shotgun cartridge so that it had half the powder and not as many of the pellets. So he's saying he'd altered it and he just wanted to injure her so that she could get compensation. And also, I believe it was said in one of the tapes as well, to give her some scars as a reminder to not do what she'd done to him to someone else.
Wow. What a guy, eh?
A catch.
The intention was for him to actually kill himself at some point. He knew he was going to be taken out. He intended to kill Chris.
Yes.
I believe that he didn't really care whether he killed Samantha or not. He says that he didn't, but he shot her twice.
Exactly. Because he says that he was intending to kill himself at that point. So he was going to kill Chris and then kill himself. And his accomplice, when they get caught later, say that they thought Raoul was going to kill himself.
Well, I find that hard to believe as well.
When Raoul ran off, one of the things that happened was he actually dropped a telephone at the scene, and that quickly linked to the accomplices.
So he had 2 accomplices, didn't he?
He did.
And one of them was a mate from his bouncing time. I think they were bouncers together.
Yes, that was Carl Ness, and he's the one who actually drove him to this scene where he shot Samantha and Chris. Carl Ness was quite a good friend. He was a previous bouncer with him. He also worked in Raoul's business, and he helped to look after things whilst Raoul was inside. And as it transpires, he's actually the one who got the weapon for Raoul and was looking into Samantha and seeing what she was up to and getting the information on Chris.
So he actually did quite a lot. Like he's had a significant role to play in this entire incident, hasn't he?
A huge part.
Because I believe he also helped him when he was on the run as well, and helped keep him in hiding. Also helped him robbing fish and chip bars, helped him get set up near Rothbury, and got him supplies and helped to hide ammunition, that kind of thing.
And very much helped Raoul on the run.
I believe that Carl Ness in the end got life imprisonment, didn't he? Did he get 40 years?
He did, and I believe he was actually charged with the murder of Chris. Although he didn't pull the trigger, he was very instrumental in the shooting and the murder.
I think they were both done for conspiracy to murder, the attempted murder of PC Rathband, who we'll talk about a bit more in a minute, and then possessing a firearm with intent.
Yes.
So the second accomplice was Quorum Owan. I don't know if I'm saying or pronouncing that properly, so apologies if not. But he also got life imprisonment, but with a minimum term of 20 years. And he was only 23 at the time.
Yes, quite young.
In fact, also, Carl was only 26, wasn't he?
Yeah, they were both quite young, really, weren't they?
Bearing in mind, Raoul was 37. When he got with Samantha, she was only 16. And then you've got Carl, who's 26, and Quorum, who's 23.
Yeah, all quite young and impressionable. And I believe Quorum got less of a sentence. He wasn't involved in getting the firearm, and he wasn't involved in getting Raoul to that first scene. or correcting information about Samantha and Chris. So his involvement didn't start at that point. So I think
Okay.
this is why he ends up getting a lesser of the sentence. And he was a mechanic and he worked in a garage in Byker. He also ended up being the driver. He sourced the vehicle that they then went on the run in, the Lexus. Yeah, so he was involved in that. And he also provided a lot of logistical support as well. But when this first happened after the shootings, there wasn't actually much known about Quorum's involvement in the case. And the next day, on Sunday, the 4th, it was in the very early hours. I think it was about 12:30.
Yeah.
Moat actually rang the police and identified himself as the gunman from the Berkeley incident and said that he had shot Samantha and Chris. And he said that he was then going to start targeting police officers in this phone call. He was on the phone with them for I think it was about 5 minute conversation, which he ranted about his dislike of the police in there. He also mentioned as part of that conversation that he was really sorry that Samantha was critically injured, and he was really annoyed about that because he had just wanted to wound her for this compensation payment. This is where this all came
Yeah,
from.
sure. But also in that as well, didn't he make threats to the hospital and say that if the doctors didn't save Sam, then he would go in and
Yeah.
kill them, like it was their responsibility to save her?
Yeah,
Because
not
he's
his
not done anything
responsibility for
wrong.
shooting her. No.
Yeah, he didn't do anything wrong. And if she died, it was down to the doctors, not him.
Yeah,
So
down
he
to
made
them.
threats to the hospital as well.
Yeah, so made threats to the hospital, threats to the police officers. And then he also, as part of this conversation, said that he had two hostages. And this is where the two accomplices come into it.
I imagine that the reason that he said he had hostages to cover his mates' backs because
Yes.
he knew that they were helping him and that he was going to be in trouble. He knew his intention was either to be killed by the police or to kill himself. And
Yes.
then that his mates would probably get into some hot water. So I imagine this hostage scenario, this lie, came about to try and protect his mates.
I think so. Like you said before, it seems quite switched on, and I think
Mm.
that was very calculated.
Because didn't the two accomplices also write their own hostage letters?
Yes, so this came about, I believe it was the next day. The families got letters delivered saying that they had been held hostage by Raoul. But one of the accomplices, Coran's, drops two letters off, with one just to his sister, with instructions to burn once she has read it, which she did not burn.
She did not burn it.
She did not burn, and the police got hold of, and it's very incriminating. So it starts to mention as part of the letter that actually it is friend who is keeping him hostage in quotation
Hostage.
marks.
Yeah.
And he is actually safer than safe, and that Raoul is actually a gent. He has issues, but he's looking after him.
It's a real gent.
Real gent.
Yes, that's how I'd describe him, sure.
Yeah. This letter they found quite quickly, so although we've got to treat it as a hostage
Potential hostage situation, yeah.
I believe it was Neil Adamson.
Neil
Was he
Adamson was the SIO.
Yes. So I seen a quote he'd put out, and he said, although they had a strong indication that they were accomplices at this point, they still had to treat it as a hostage situation until
Of
they knew
course.
otherwise.
Well,
Yeah.
because the thing is with these investigations, with all investigations, is that they move very quickly. I don't think people realize how quickly they move in real time. And you're
Yes.
getting information coming in at you at all times of the day and night, and things change so much and so rapidly. And officers have got to make very quick decisions. Those that are leading these investigations, they've got to make very fast decisions, and they've got to be able to justify what they're doing. Because if anything goes wrong, then it comes back on them, doesn't it? And imagine
Yes.
if they hadn't treated it as a hostage situation and they were hostages and then they were harmed, there'd be
Yes.
absolute uproar. So
Yeah.
Even though they knew that they were more likely to be accomplices, they had to really, didn't they, go down that route.
100%. Like you say, the criticism that would come would be horrendous. And interestingly, that you mentioned that about the quickness of these decisions, because that comes into play here very nicely, where Raoul Moat rings up and starts making these threats. So, as we were saying, he rang at midnight, was on the phone about 5 minutes, saying that he's going to kill police officers, he's going to aim to shoot, and he won't be brought in alive. So he starts making these threats. And within less than 10 minutes from this phone call being made, the police then receive a radio call from PC David Rathband stating that he's been shot while sat in his patrol car.
So within 10 minutes, he's phoned the police, told the police that they are targets. He will shoot any police officers.
Yeah.
And then he's done just that.
Yes. And so when they've started looking at the footage from the ANPR camera that David's patrol vehicle had in it, they can see actually with the timings, he was probably making that phone call whilst he'd already spotted PC David Rathband and already had him in his sights, because he was parked just off a roundabout and you can see the black Lexus go past. And then it comes back
round, doesn't it?
Again, which I find again quite chilling. I get goosebumps thinking about that. So he was on the phone 5 minutes, and then within another 5 minutes, we knew that this shooting had taken place. So David Rathband was sat in his patrol car just off the A1, and he said that he noticed someone approach his vehicle, and within seconds they were at his passenger side. And when he looked to the passenger side, he actually recognised Raoul Moat.
Because I think PC Rathband had previously arrested Raoul, hadn't he?
He had, yes. I think it was about a year before he had had some involvement.
He was driving around in the uninsured vehicle, wasn't he? I think that's what PC Rathband had arrested him for. So PC Rathband already knew of Raoul. He'd had interaction and engagement with him prior to this.
Yeah, he had. And there's a lot of coincidences around this. It's very strange.
Yeah, so, I find it's bizarre.
Again, that's just shudder. Yeah. So David Rathband, when he came on duty that night, the police officers always have a briefing before they go out onto their duty, don't they?
They do.
So he was a traffic officer, and when he came in, of course, things like a shooting going on and a shooter being on the run are going to be huge topics of conversation, because it just doesn't happen every day, does it?
No, it doesn't, thankfully.
So there was conversation around it, but there was no threats or anything assessed to the police officers.
Just on the run.
Yes, and he was just on the run. So there was no immediate threat to the police. So there was nothing addressed in the briefing. But David Rathband actually brought it up and spoke about it in part of the briefing, and said he mentioned this stop that he'd had previously with Raoul, and he mentioned that actually when he'd stopped him, he was a very angry man, and he actually said that he was a bit of a lunatic. So he'd had that conversation before he went out on his duties that evening.
Which is weird, but then also what's even more so is that David Rathband wasn't supposed to actually be on duty that night, was he? He was actually off duty, but he'd taken an extra shift because it was his daughter Mia's 12th birthday.
That's right.
And he wanted to give her and a friend space. And so he's picked up that extra shift. He's come in when he shouldn't have really been on duty. He's then had that conversation in the briefing, and then Raoul's turned up at the side of his car and he's recognised him immediately before he's then been shot. Now, this shooting was absolutely brutal because he came up to the passenger side of the window, held the sawn off, and then shot him straight in the face, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. He did. So he shot him, and I believe the first shot hit him in the side of the head and the face area. And then David has still been conscious, amazingly wasn't killed outright from that, to be honest.
I wonder if some of the glass took away some of the impact.
Yeah, it's got to
I
have
think the glass
taken
have
some
got
of
to
that.
have, yeah.
Yeah,
Had it not been through the glass, I think that it may have been a different outcome.
yeah. He'd had that shot to the head, and then he'd opened his door to try and get out of the vehicle and realised that Raoul is still stood there. And then he discharges a second shot, which hits David in the shoulder.
Now, bearing in mind, he's been shot now in the head and also shot in the shoulder. He had the foresight to still
Yes.
think on his feet, and he played dead in
Yeah.
the hope that Raoul would go. And
Oh.
he discharged the two shots really quite rapidly, so within like 5 to 10 seconds of each other,
Yeah.
and then he's run off. But then, even then, he's been able to open up his emergency airwave and contact control and tell him that he's being shot. Oh, I've got chills again.
I know, amazing. Like, to be able to do that in such an injured state, because as we know, PC Rathband actually lost his sight, didn't
He
he?
did,
And he had
yeah.
severe injuries. He was very lucky to survive the injuries. So to have still the thought of this is what I must do, and then to still be able to get on that radio and get himself
Call
help,
for help.
and also alert people to what's happening.
Yeah, and that they've got 9 minutes between his call and the shooting of PC Rathband, which is not a long time. And at that point, he said on the call, I am targeting police. I'll not come in alive.
Yeah.
But officers are moving again very quickly and making rapid decisions. But 9 minutes is not a long time
It's not.
for
Not at
them to be
all.
able to assess the risk and start taking action.
Yeah,
They've
it
got the
does.
call, they've got to analyze the call and listen to the call.
Yeah.
They've got to consider the level of threat to both civilians and police and how they act upon that. And then also be doing things like getting the cell site analysis and preparing, like,
Yeah. And getting the
9
right people on the call, even, because that's just a call handler is sat there, and all of a sudden she's like, I've got Raoul Moat. And it sounds like she was really quick thinking, which of course call handlers are
Oh,
trained to do. But then it's very different being in that situation and it happening, isn't it? So she had him
yeah.
on the phone while she'd wrote his name down on paper and was waving it around, so then the supervisors could get involved and people could start listening in on that call as well.
Yeah, but like decisions in incidents like this, because there's so much risk and because it's so
Yeah.
big, needs to go up to top level.
Yeah, it
And
does.
9 minutes for all of this to be happening is not a long time, is it?
No,
So
not at all.
they're processing all of this, and in the meantime, like who would have thought he would have found a police officer and been able to shoot him within 9 minutes of
So
notifying the
quick.
police? It
Yeah,
just seems so freak.
it is, isn't
So
it?
it's quite.
Yeah,
I don't know how many people believe in fate. People have their own thoughts and theories about it, but a lot of it seems quite fateful in the, like you said about
yeah,
him being on duty when he shouldn't have been on duty, in the conversations that he had, and then there he is parked on that roundabout assessing
as he made his
traffic,
call.
also solo crewed
Yeah,
on a Saturday night. He was out
yeah,
solo crewed, sat there as Raoul's making the call, and then Raoul spotted him and then gone round the roundabout twice. And
yeah. Oh, it's all, how it worked out.
it's so sad. And
It
David
really
Rathband
is.
he was really brave and he was really courageous, and he went on to start a charity,
Did, yeah,
and he did a lot of work to raise money and to help others. But
yeah,
sadly, his relationship with his wife broke down in 2012, and then I just don't know that he could cope anymore. And sadly, he ended up dying by suicide, which
yeah.
is
Which
just
is so
an
sad, isn't
awful
it?
outcome. Yeah, it really is.
And he's very much a victim of Raoul Moat in terms of, yes, he survived that shooting, but actually the way things have panned out then after it, like his suicide is kind of directly linked with all
Yes,
of this going off, isn't it? So
it is.
it it is really, really sad. Within 15 minutes of shooting David Rathband, he then called again and was gloating and saying, "This is what I've done. Hopefully now you'll take me seriously." And again began more threats, saying what he would do to police. I believe as part of that conversation, he said at that point that the members of the public were not at risk and that they shouldn't fear him, but any police officers should.
And this then became, this is when the manhunt really stepped up, isn't it, and became huge. We had officers coming from a number of different forces. I think the operation was somewhere in the region of like 1.4 million in terms of police operation, and involved something like 160 armed officers, which is just huge. And like I say, being pulled in from
all
everywhere
over the country.
Yeah.
We had all over the country. We had people coming over from Ireland. It was just such a huge response then, wasn't it? And for us, I think this is where it became strange working in the police at that time.
It was really bizarre because he was targeting police, and of course he said police officers, but that doesn't necessarily mean police officers. It was police officers or police staff.
Yeah.
Anybody really that worked with the police. And as a result, we had a number of restrictions, I guess, put on us, didn't we?
We did.
And this is what the strange thing was, is because we only had normal white transit vans. We don't have marked vehicles. Now, a lot of police forces have marked crime scene investigation vehicles. They were unmarked. So that was actually a good thing. And our uniforms were quite plain, apart from a badge on the left-hand side, which is the
we
police
just had little
logo.
Black polos, didn't we? Black polos, black combats.
Yeah, but we were effectively told that we had to come in plain clothes. We had to be really careful and hypervigilant and alert entering and exiting the police station at all times. As a scene investigator, we've talked about this before, you work solo a lot, single crewed. We were unable to do that. We had to go out double crewed. And then also we were only allowed to respond to major crime at that point as well, weren't we?
Yeah.
And I remember being on duty one night, and because everybody was on such high alert, in the police station we worked in, we had a car park out the back, and we had high walls. You remember?
I remember. Yeah, this is why I'm laughing.
We had high walls, didn't we? And then there was flats around it. It was me and you, actually, wasn't it? We'd come back in.
It was on that sloped hill next to the police station, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it was really dark. I think we'd just been to an assault or something.
Yeah.
And it must have been heading on for midnight.
Yeah, it was coming to end of shift, wasn't it?
And everything was so quiet. But it was just so creepy. And we were like, he could be in that flat with a gun, like just trained on us.
Well, I think at one point we were convinced there was someone on the roof.
Yeah, I think we were.
Thankfully, we did not report this one. I wasn't getting caught out again.
Yeah, it's just on the roof with a fishing rod.
Yeah. Well, as we'll get to later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But we were just so kind of hyper vigilant, and I think, like I say, on high alert, because we'd been put on high alert, and I think everybody was a bit the same. And sometimes it's just circumstances. Your brain can play tricks on you, can't it?
Yeah.
But when we got back into the police station, we're like, oh my God, what we like.
Yeah.
I think
it was just creepy though, wasn't it? Like you say, you're on high alert, your adrenaline's gone a little bit. We had responded to something serious. We weren't allowed to go out and deal with other things. So I think that puts you a bit more on alert anyway, doesn't it? But what was the suggestion at first, Ange, as well? About
it was so funny, wasn't it?
Yeah, go on.
So like I just said, we drive around in unmarked vans with really a tiny logo on our shirt. So there's nothing really to say we are police, apart from coming in and out of the station, I guess.
Yeah.
And they suggested that we go out with police officers So we'd go out in a police vehicle with a police officer, and we were like, "You're joking, aren't you? You might as well just stick a target on our back."
We'll keep our plain van, thanks.
Keep our plain van and our plain clothes. Thanks very much. You're like much more likely to spot a bloody police panda car and a police
Yeah.
officer. Let's just go double crude and stick in our plain white little transits.
Yeah.
Now, I have to say that disappointingly for me, I don't know if that's the right word, but if people have heard us talk, then and listen to a couple of the other podcasts, they'll know that CSIs love the high level major crime stuff because it's something so different. For me, at one end, when the shootings first happened in Gateshead, I was on my rest days. I think we both were, weren't we?
We were.
So we were off that weekend, and then we were in during the week, but then off on our long weekend at the other end. And I didn't have a huge involvement in it, which makes me quite sad in some respects, I guess. But you and I, we did help with the examination of the vehicle, the Lexus, once it was finally recovered. So we came in on shift, and there was two CSIs examining it, and we were effectively like exhibits officers for them. So we were helping with recovery, packaging and logging of exhibits out of the vehicle.
There was a lot in that car, wasn't
there?
There
was a lot, lots of McDonald's wrappers.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you had more involvement, didn't you? Because you ended up going to the lockup.
Yeah, so the accomplices that we mentioned before, and we talked about one of them working in a garage. There was this conversation with Raoul saying about him doctoring the shotgun shells and that he was reducing the amount of powder, and actually he'd been buying fishing weights as well and introducing those into the shells for maximum damage and impact, really.
Yeah.
And there was reason to believe that he was doing some of this in the garage of where one of the accomplices worked. So I was involved with the examination of that garage. So I had to go down, and we were checking for, well, firstly, if we could link Raoul to the garage. Was there
Yeah.
anything, DNA, fingerprints, anything like that to link him there? And then also for any signs of the shotgun ammunition or pellets, things like that as well. Yes, so I had some involvement with that. And again, that's just a bit creepy, like when you stood outside and actually there's a police presence there and you're starting to attract attention of press and things. You're like, can we not have all of this attention right now if he's looking, please?
Yeah.
We already know he is around this area.
You've got all of these police officers.
Yeah.
You just go over there.
Yeah. Can I just go in a bit sneaky bicky? Like,
Yeah.
Thank you. So such an interesting time for us to be involved in that and work in the police. All sorts went on in part of this manhunt. We've mentioned the phone calls he'd already done. There was also a 49-page letter dropped off with one of his associates to deliver to the police, which again then detailed it was effectively a confession in many ways. It talked about what he'd done with Christopher Brown, talked about Samantha, it talked about him shooting David Rathband.
I mean, at least he was honest.
Yeah.
Credit where it's due, eh?
At the very start of this week as well, and we start getting the mini armed robberies happening. So we have this very first one in Seaton Delaval, where a fish and chip shop was held up.
Man's got to eat.
He got to eat.
On the run or not, you got to eat.
Yeah,
and if you're going out, you might as well enjoy your last fish supper.
Oh, I know, get nice fish and chips. So yes, he did the first armed robbery there. So he got some money from the shop attendant as well. I believe they said it was around £100 he got away with there. So not a huge amount, but enough to keep sustaining him whilst he's on the run. But here, the Lexus car is spotted in the area, and the two associates are also spotted in the area. Then moving into the next day, the car is discovered in Rothbury. And Rothbury is such a quiet little place, isn't it?
It really is. It's lovely. When I first started out as a CSI, I worked up in rural Northumberland. And
Yeah.
I can tell you now, I never got called to Rothbury once.
No, I am not surprised. Such
I
a
mean, I
quaint little place.
drove through it, near it, and it was lovely. It's a beautiful area of the country. It really is.
Well, this is when Rothbury really got on the map, isn't it?
It is, yeah, for all
So,
of the wrong reasons.
yeah,
But yeah,
such a quiet place. And then it's plastered all over the news that actually this is where his vehicle's been found. There's reason to believe he's still in that area. So then the police put on a 2 mile exclusion zone onto Rothbury, and there was armed police everywhere. Imagine this was such a shock for the people
the
of
residents.
Rothbury.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a quiet town to all of a sudden you have armed police swarmed all over the place. They're not allowed in or out. You've
But
got
also knowing that you've got a killer in your village.
exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, it must be quite terrifying, that really.
And I think the two accomplices actually got arrested up in Rothbury, didn't they?
Yes, so they were walking down just casually, as you do,
As you
walking
do.
down the road. I think it was the next day again, they found a tent that Raoul had been staying in, and he had camping equipment. So he had the tent, he had a duvet, all that sort of thing. And this is again, like I say, where the accomplices, they start being like hostage accomplice, because it turned out actually they'd been into a camping shop and they had bought all of this equipment for Raoul, and Raoul actually wasn't with them when they went in to do this. So had they have wanted to raise the alarm, escape, they had perfect opportunity here whilst they weren't with him. But instead they kitted him out.
They were aiding him. Yeah.
Yeah. Inside that tent they found yet another letter addressed to Samantha and a recording of much of the same of what had been said on the phone calls. But there starts to become a bit of a change here. So far all of that threat has been towards the police. So as they listen to this recording, we start realizing that actually now there's a threat to the public. And what he had said as part of the recording is that he was really unhappy with the press coverage. There was a lot, not just about the incident, there was a lot about his personal life and his family life and the accusations of abuse. And he was really keeping an eye on the press and the news and what people were saying about him. And he did not like this.
Well, I can
at
imagine
all.
not, because like we've said throughout, there's no accountability, and all the things that he's denying all of a sudden are in the public domain. He's known internationally, and all of his character flaws, the abuses that he's done, are now becoming public information.
Yeah.
Probably things potentially that he feels ashamed of. The last thing you want to do is
Yeah.
advertise the worst parts of yourself, is it?
You're right. Yeah. So he really didn't like that. Apparently, this recording he left was quite substantial. I think it was about 4 hours. As part of this, he said then about the press and that he really wasn't happy about what was being said, that for every inaccuracy that he read in the paper, he would kill a member of the public. This is a big turn.
Very different, isn't it? Yeah. I'm not a threat to the public. I won't harm the public. To every inaccuracy that he saw as an inaccuracy, he'd kill a member of the public. So not even the member of the press, just anyone.
Exactly. It became then the police actually asked for a blackout on the media. There was a voluntary agreement put in place between the Association of Chief Officers and the media, and they did stick to it, thankfully.
So then that's where in Rothbury the siege happened, wasn't it? And the standoff between armed officers and Raoul himself. And also one of my favourite parts of this story, where good old Gaza rocks up.
Yes.
Paul Gascoigne, ex-England football star, turns up to the scene in his dressing gown.
Yeah.
With a fishing rod. Some chicken and some cans of beer.
Yeah.
Said that they were mates and that he could help talk him down. They'd never met before ever, had they?
I don't believe so. I think it's really sad, the stuff that's gone on with Gaza as well, like from such a professional to how things have went with both his mental health and actually addiction. But from what he's come out and said after, he was on cocaine and drunk at the time. And by the time he got there, he thought he was brothers with Raoul
Yeah,
Moat.
it had that many lines of coke. Imagine the
So
police
surreal.
disbelief, though. It's just bizarre, isn't it? You're in the middle of this standoff with an armed man who's like killed one person, seriously injured two others, including a police officer, and then all of a sudden Paul Gascoigne turns up with chicken and a couple of cans, asking to go and have a natter with him.
A fishing rod. Here, I'll sort him out.
Yeah,
Never mind these trained negotiators.
Yeah. I've often wondered whether Raoul knew whether Gaz had turned up.
I know, yeah.
And also, could you imagine if the police were like, this might not be a bad idea, actually, it's Gaza, and then let him in? Can you imagine?
Oh, God.
Can you imagine Raoul, like, what's going on?
What you doing here? Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, we
such
laugh,
a bizarre
but it's
turn.
just, it is weird.
Well, it was such a bizarre thing, as we've talked about anyway, such a bizarre time. To then add that into the mix, you're like, what is going on here?
You couldn't make it up, could you?
What on earth?
Couldn't make it up. Now, I remember I finished my working week. I'd gone off on rest days. And when I got home, I put the news on and they'd just caught up with him in Rothbury and it all started. So
yeah.
Being the saddo that I am, bearing in mind I'd just been working crime scenes all day, I then just watched the whole thing unfold with a glass of wine. I was glued to the telly. So when this whole Gaza thing come up, I was like, no way. And it's surreal because you work for the force and yet you're watching it on the telly and you're just like, oh my goodness, it's just this real.
Yeah.
Even for us working in it to watch it all unfold.
Yeah. Because these things just don't happen every day, like you said before, thankfully. And this was such a high profile case with, like you've said, officers from all over the country. It was a week-long manhunt. It was just huge, absolutely massive. Yeah, so it all culminated really in this, didn't it? There was a 6-hour standoff between armed officers, Raoul, and throughout the standoff there was quite a few times that they thought he was going to kill himself. And as part of the conversations, he was saying that he didn't really have anyone that cared about him.
See, he's done all these things and it's really awful, but as an empathetic human, just to hear that, give a pang of sadness in my heart.
It does, doesn't it? You do feel awful for anyone to feel that way. But it was of his own making a lot as well, because actually he had multiple relationships. He had women who actually cared for him. He had children, and actually that's not the path that he chose.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of controversy around him actually killing himself. The tasers that were being used at the time. And the issue was they hadn't been Home Office approved yet, and they came direct from the supplier. There was a lot of speculation around because I believe one of the tasers had been discharged, but people were trying to say, was it the taser that then caused him to shoot? But it was shown that that wasn't the case, and actually he had shot, and they were going to taser to try and stop him from doing that, but actually he had shot himself before that. So, and then he was rushed to the hospital, wasn't he? Rushed to one of the local hospitals, Newcastle General, I think, under police escort.
Yes, I remember the scene investigators had been on standby for most of the night up near Rothbury. They had to follow behind the ambulance as well, so there was police escort, ambulance, scene investigators, and I believe that he was declared dead in the ambulance. Yeah. And then the ambulance was forensically examined, and then staff also were sent to post-mortem as well. Now, again, I know I probably shouldn't say this, but I would have loved to have been involved in that post-mortem.
It's just interest, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we were talking to another practitioner recently, and they were saying you don't join these jobs to not do
want to do them.
You want to do the things that aren't your usual.
We have actually been to a post-mortem where somebody used a shotgun to shoot themselves. So we have actually seen the effects of it and what that does. But still, this would have been a really interesting case to be on that post-mortem. But there I was, watching the news with my glass of wine instead.
It would be a fascinating one to be involved with, just for being such a high profile case. That was the end of the manhunt. Ended up getting kind of hero worshipped by certain groups of people, didn't he?
Yeah, I can't quite believe that this happened, really.
I can't.
I couldn't ever wrap my head around how anybody could hero worship this man.
No.
It was awful.
It really was. There was two aspects that seemed to be coming from it, and there was a group of people that were kind of hero worshipping him because of the target on the police. And then the other side of it was a lot of scorned males, by the looks of it, who were blaming Samantha in a way and saying that, oh, she cheated on him, she caused all of this, and were worshipping that he'd done that, and were like, good on him for going against this woman who's cheated on you and stuff, which wasn't even the case. But even if it was, does that mean that this level of behaviour and this level of violence is okay?
Acceptable. It's excessive, isn't it? It's not a reasonable response. She hadn't cheated on him, but like say, even if she had, this was not an acceptable or reasonable response.
No, not at all.
It's that group of people that's quite worrying, those that worship Andrew Tate with the toxic masculinity and the misogyny, because anybody in the right mind would not think that this was okay and he was a hero. And like you say, there's that group of men that blamed her, like victim blaming. Come on.
Yeah. It's disgusting, isn't it?
And then those that hate the police, like the police, I don't always agree with everything that they do, but they are there to protect and serve, and they do. Those that work on the front line every day and those that join and want to do a good job, like forget about the bureaucracy, forget about some of the laws, forget about some of the nonsense. There's good and bad in across all walks of life, in every profession. There's good and bad, and it's the same with the police. But the mass majority are there to help and serve and protect, and they do a really difficult job, I think. And there's very little respect left for police these days. I mean, we're going back 15 years, but these days I think there's very little respect left for the police. But for them to be targeted in that way and then shot, and then people hero worship somebody because he shot a police officer in the face, is just vile. I just find it disgusting. Yeah.
The fact one of his daughters ended up coming out, it was actually the daughter he'd abused. She ended up putting a statement out about it and saying that anybody who's hero worshipping him are kind of standing up for child abusers and domestic abusers, and that they shouldn't be making light of that. And you're like, as a young girl, she shouldn't even be having to see any of that. But she was kind of drawing attention to, actually, he is an abuser. He's done all of these things, and that's not okay to be worshipped. She said for a long time she felt responsible for what happened to Samantha and Chris, and that if she hadn't have gone against him and reported the abuse and he didn't go inside, it mightn't have happened. And she spoke out for people being abused as well, and said, if you know anyone being abused, speak up. And I wish someone had saved me when I was too scared to do it myself.
I mean, how courageous was she coming out and being at her most vulnerable after she's the one that's been abused? She's also a victim of Raoul Moat. And often when people are abused, there's often shame attached to that. Yet she stuck her head above the parapet and come out publicly to try and help and encourage others, but also say, no, it's wrong to worship this man. He is actually an abuser. He was a violent, aggressive man. Yeah. And then also look at the actions that he's taken. Not reasonable.
Not reasonable at all.
Not reasonable, Dee. Not reasonable, Dee.
Not reasonable or proportionate.
No, most definitely not. Well, I think that we've covered this quite thoroughly, and I hope that we've managed to give people a sense of what it was like at the time for us working in the police, as well as look at the case in a bit more detail and look at it as it unfolded. I've really enjoyed this episode and looking back at it. Like I say, I can't quite believe it's 15 years and such a high profile, important case as well, that it has been really interesting.
Really enjoyed going back and doing a bit of a revisit on the case, hopefully pulling out some points as well that people actually didn't know about, because I think we've uncovered quite a few facts that weren't really heavily in the media. They are out there, but not heavily involved with it, are they?
Yeah. So thank you everybody for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have, and we will catch you again in another fortnight when we will take you back under the barrier tape.